the Forsaken Sentinel. The three suns of Nixia blazed mercilessly in the violet-black sky, their overlapping light creating unusual shadows across the endless crimson dunes. Heat waves distorted the horizon, making the barren landscape shimmer, like a fevered hallucination. In this uninhabitable wasteland with no sign of life for thousands of kilometers, Sentinel Lyra Voss counted what she expected to be her final breaths. Buried up to her neck in scorching sand, she had stopped struggling. Hours ago, the automated Justicar drone had carried out her sentence with mechanical precision, a public execution without an audience. Her crime, refusing to execute civilian dissidents during the Mira colony uprising. Her punishment, abandonment in the Ate, deadliest region of the planet. The heat baked her exposed skin, cracking her lips despite the moisture-preserving biology of her genetically enhanced body. The neural dampener collar around her neck dug into her flesh, its control panel blinking lazily in the punishing heat, suppressing her enhanced sensory abilities and any hope of calling for help. Lyra blinked away sweat from her amber eyes and watched as the smallest sun began its descent. "At least I die with my conscience intact," she muttered, her once commanding voice rough from dehydration. A sudden gust of wind sent painful grains of sand against her face. She closed her eyes against the onslaught, having long since lost the strength to turn her head. When she opened them again, something impossible appeared on the horizon. A figure, two-legged and upright, walking directly toward her through heat waves that should have killed any living creature. Lyra blinked hard. Desert mirages had tormented her for hours, showing water, shade, rescue, all cruel fabrications of a dying mind. But this mirage didn't shimmer or distort. It moved with purpose, growing larger as it approached. "Wonderful," she said bitterly. The hallucinations, final stage before the end. The figure resolved into a man, surprisingly human-looking, wearing a patchwork environment suit that seemed cobbled together from salvaged parts. A tattered hood shaded his face, and he walked, with a slight limp that suggested old injuries. He carried what appeared to be a makeshift excavation tool over one shoulder, and a battered canteen at his waist. He stopped 10 feet from her, pushed back his hood, and revealed a weathered face with sharp features. A network of faint silver. Scars traced patterns across his tanned skin, disappearing beneath the collar of his suit. His eyes were an unsettling pale green that seemed to capture and reflect the desert light. He tilted his head, studying her as if finding a human head protruding from desert sand was a mild curiosity rather than a shock. "Well," his voice was deep, roughened by the dry air, "that's not something you see every day." Lyra stared back, unable to decide if he was real or a particularly detailed hallucination. "Are you actually here, or have I finally lost my mind completely?" "Both possibilities seem equally likely," he replied, crouching down to her eye level. "Though I'm pretty sure I'm real. Tarek, scavenger, not from around here, obviously." Scavenger, Lyra tested the word. The desert nomads who salvaged technology from abandoned outposts and crashed ships were largely considered myths, ghost stories told to frighten new colonists. "What are you doing in the Red Wastes? This area is uninhabitable." Uninhabitable is subjective. Tarek pulled out his canteen, unscrewed the cap and offered it to her lips. "Was tracking a downed freight hauler until the dust storm hit. Lost my bearings." The water touched her cracked lips, cold, real water, not a hallucination. Relief flooded her system as she drank carefully. "Easy," he cautioned, pulling the canteen away. "Too much at once will make you sick." Lyra licked her lips, savoring the moisture. "And what do your scavenger ethics say about buried sentinels? Do you save them, rob them, or leave them to die?" A hint of amusement crossed his face. "Depends on whether they're worth saving." He circled around her, examining the extent of her burial. The sand had been compacted and hardened almost like concrete around her body. Impressive trap. Military-grade compaction. Someone really wanted to make a point. "An automated Justicar," Lyra replied. "Very thorough with punishments." Tarek pulled a multi-tool from his pocket and began testing the hardened sand. I'm considering my options. Helping strangers buried in deadly deserts hasn't typically ended well for me. And how often does that specific scenario arise in your life? More than you'd think. He started digging carefully around her shoulders. Who exactly are you, and what did you do to deserve this architectural marvel of punishment? Lyra hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Lyra Voss. I disagreed with certain military directives. The hegemony doesn't appreciate dissent. Clearly. Tarek's fingers brushed against the metal collar, and she tensed involuntarily. And this fashion accessory? A security measure. Against what? Me? Tarek paused his digging, studying her face closely. Interesting. He continued working methodically, breaking apart the hardened sand with surprising efficiency. Most people, buried in deserts, tend to be dangerous. Are you dangerous, Lyra Voss? Only to oppressive systems and men who ask too many questions, she replied with a sharp smile. He laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. Fair enough. As the sky darkened to deep indigo, Tarek worked steadily, breaking through the hardened crust layer by layer. The temperature dropped rapidly, as it always did on Nixia, the harsh heat giving way to bone-chilling cold. You're not very talkative for someone being rescued, Tarek observed, having freed her shoulders and upper chest. I'm conserving energy, Lyra replied. In truth, she was studying him, trying to understand his motives. No one did anything without reason in her experience, especially not crossing a deadly desert to help a stranger. Why are you really here, scavenger? Tarek didn't look up from his work. Told you. Lost my bearings tracking salvage. In the exact location of my execution? The probability seems low. Maybe the universe has a weird sense of humor. He shrugged. Or maybe your execution site happens to be near where my navigation system failed in the last storm. Choose whichever explanation you prefer. Another hour passed before Tarek finally broke through enough of the hardened sand to give Lyra leverage, to pull herself free. Her limbs, stiff from immobility, failed her on her first attempt to stand. She collapsed against him, her body unexpectedly pressed to his. Tarek steadied her with surprising strength for his lean frame. Easy there, Sentinel. Lyra pulled away as soon as her legs would support her, self-consciously adjusting the tattered remains of what had once been a standard-issue Sentinel uniform. Her skin, normally olive-toned, was burned and abraded from the sand. I need to get this collar off, she said, fingers tracing the metal band. About that. Tarek folded his arms. Maybe we should discuss what it's for first. Lyra's amber eyes narrowed. It's a control device. It suppresses certain abilities. What kind of abilities make someone nervous enough to put a collar on you before burying you in the desert? She considered lying but opted for a partial truth. Enhanced sensory perception, accelerated neural pathways, sentinel augmentations, and they worried you'd what? Sense your way out from under the sand? No. Lyra looked toward the now dark horizon. They worried I'd override the Justicar's programming. It's partly organic. Tarek whistled low. So you're powerful enough that they're afraid you could hack their execution robots? That's not reassuring for your new traveling companion. Would you prefer I'd stayed buried? I'm just saying a little transparency might be nice. He glanced at a device on his wrist, which displayed a holographic map. Nearest settlement is about 80 kilometers southeast. My shelter's 25 kilometers northwest. Your call. Lyra studied the map, recognizing nothing. She'd been unconscious when transported to this execution site. The settlement. I need to contact someone. Suit yourself. Tarek shrugged, then hesitated. But fair warning, if you're a fugitive, settlements have surveillance, and that collar is probably broadcasting your location. Lyra's hand flew to the metal band, her expression changing. You're right. I hadn't considered. So you are running. From someone important enough for tracking technology. I'm not a criminal, she stated flatly. Never said you were, but clearly you're someone of interest. He tapped the map closed. My shelter it is. We can figure out how to disable that tracker, then decide next steps. The temperature continued to plummet as they walked across the dunes. Nixia's extreme temperature variations, scorching days and freezing nights, were part of what made it uninhabitable. Lyra, weakened from her ordeal and dressed in thin, torn garments, began to shiver violently. Tarek noticed immediately. Without comment, he removed his outer thermal layer and draped it over her shoulders. "But your temperature regulation," she protested. "Has backup systems," he finished. "I'll survive." The jacket enveloped her in unexpected warmth and carried his scent, a strange mixture of mechanical oil, dried herbs, and something distinctly foreign to her senses. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Gratitude wasn't commonly expressed in Sentinel training. Tarek merely nodded, his attention on the scanner in his hand. "We need to pick up the pace, another dust storm forming to the west." Revelations in the dust. They trudged through the increasingly cold night, Nixia's twin moons casting eerie, overlapping shadows across the desert landscape. Lyra studied Tarek's profile in the moonlight. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to harsh environments, but there was something else, a precision to his movements that seemed at odds with his casual demeanor. "What brought a scavenger to the Red Wastes?" she asked finally. "It's far from the usual salvage routes." "Necessity," he answered without turning. "The hegemony's been pushing outward, claiming more territory. The inner sectors got too crowded with military patrols." "You're avoiding the hegemony specifically?" Lyra pressed. Tarek glanced at her. "Let's just say I prefer to operate outside their jurisdiction." "You mean outside their laws?" "Their laws work for them, not for people like me." The abrupt end to his response indicated he considered the subject closed. Lyra noted the boundary but filed away her observations. This scavenger was hiding something beyond the usual smuggler's caution. By the time they reached Tarek's shelter, a reinforced structure half buried in the side of a massive dune, Lyra was exhausted. The shelter door slid open at Tarek's touch, revealing a surprisingly well-equipped interior, compact but efficient with technology that seemed more advanced than standard frontier equipment. "Not what I expected from a simple scavenger," Lyra observed as she entered. Tarek secured the door behind them. "I invest in survival." He moved to a storage unit and pulled out emergency rations and water. "Eat, rest. We'll deal with that collar." "In the morning." Lyra accepted the food but remained standing, studying the shelter's layout. "Where did you learn to hack military-grade security tech?" Tarek paused, his back to her. "Who said I knew how? Your confidence in offering suggests experience." She took a step closer. "And this shelter has shielding that blocked my collar's transmission the moment we entered. That's not standard equipment for a desert nomad." He turned slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "You seem to know a lot about standard equipment, and you seem to be more than you claim." The small space between them charged with tension. Tarek held her gaze for a long moment before a smile, small but genuine, broke through. "Looks like we're both keeping secrets, Sentinel. Get some rest. Whatever you're running from, whatever I'm hiding, it can wait until morning." Exhaustion finally won over suspicion. Lyra settled onto the narrow cot, still wrapped in Tarek's thermal layer. The last thing she saw before closing her eyes was Tarek checking security monitors, his profile illuminated by their blue glow, the set of his shoulders suggesting a man far more acquainted with danger than any ordinary scavenger should be. Outside, the winds of Nixia howled as the predicted dust storm arrived, burying all traces of their passage across the desert. By morning, it would be as if they had never existed. A fitting metaphor, Lyra thought, as consciousness slipped away, for two people who had already disappeared from their respective worlds. The temperature in Tarek's shelter plummeted as Nixia's twin moons reached their zenith. Even with environmental controls, the desert night sent icy tendrils through the reinforced walls. Lyra woke with a violent shiver, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. The cot, positioned near an outer wall, had become a cold slab despite the thermal blanket. She sat up, wrapping Tarek's jacket tighter around her shoulders. Across the small space, Tarek worked at a console, his face illuminated by holographic displays showing thermal scans of the surrounding desert. "Can't sleep?" he asked without turning. "Your hospitality needs improvement," Lyra replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Is freezing your guests standard scavenger protocol?" Tarek glanced over his shoulder, the blue light casting sharp shadows across his scarred face. "Power conservation. We're running on auxiliary systems to minimize detection. Signatures." Lyra stood, wincing as her bare feet touched the freezing floor. She moved closer to Tarek's workstation, drawn to both the relative warmth of the equipment and the curious data displays. "What are you tracking?" "Heat signatures, movement patterns." He gestured toward a flickering orange cluster several kilometers distant. "Sand beetles. They travel in swarms this time of year. Good news is they're moving away from us." Lyra leaned closer, studying the display. "And the bad news? They're running from something." He highlighted another signature, larger, faster, with a distinctive pattern. "That's a hegemony scout ship, low-altitude sweep pattern. They're looking for me." It wasn't a question. "Seems likely." Tarek's fingers danced across the controls, adjusting scanning parameters. "They're thorough. Thermal imaging, signal tracking, ground-penetrating radar." Lyra's hand went to the collar still securely fastened around her neck. "How long before they find us?" "They won't. Not tonight." He indicated the shelter schematics on another display. "This place is shielded, thermally, electromagnetically, seismically. We're effectively invisible." She studied his profile in the blue light. "You've done this before." "Done what?" "Hidden from authorities." Tarek's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Let's just say I value my privacy." Another violent shiver racked Lyra's body. Tarek finally turned fully toward her, taking in her condition with a critical eye. "Your biology isn't adapted for cold," he observed. "Enhanced for combat efficiency, not comfort," she admitted. Without further comment, Tarek stood and moved to adjust the environmental controls. "I can divert more power to heating, but it'll draw from our shielding capacity." "How much weaker would that make us?" "Enough to be detected if they pass directly overhead." He hesitated. "But you need warmth or your condition will deteriorate." "Don't compromise the shelter," Lyra said firmly. "I'll manage." Tarek studied her for a moment, then moved to a storage compartment and extracted what appeared to be a metallic disc the size of his palm. He pressed a recessed button, and the disc expanded into a thin, flexible sheet radiating gentle heat. "Emergency thermal," he explained, draping it around her shoulders. "Limited charge, but it should help." The immediate warmth was glorious. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment of relief. "Thank you." Tarek returned to his console. "You should know. I've been analyzing your collar while you slept. It's more complex than standard neural dampeners." Lyra tensed. "What do you mean?" "It's not just blocking your enhanced abilities, it's monitoring them, recording data." His fingers manipulated a three-dimensional schematic of the collar that rotated in the air above his console. "And there's something else. A secondary system I can't quite identify. A failsafe," Lyra supplied grimly. "If tampered with incorrectly, it delivers a neurotoxin." Tarek's eyebrows rose. "They really don't want you getting away, do they?" "The hegemony values its investments. Sentinels undergo extensive enhancement procedures. We're expensive. And rare, I imagine." Tarek continued examining the schematic. "So why risk executing one?" Lyra was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Because I discovered something they want buried even more than me." Tarek turned to face her fully. "What did you find, Sentinel Voss?" "Evidence of civilian massacres ordered by High Command. Not isolated incidents, a systemic policy of eliminating potential dissident populations before they can organize." Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched into fists. "I was ordered to lead one such operation on Mira Colony. I refused. And instead of simply discharging, They couldn't risk what I knew becoming public. The evidence I collected is encrypted and hidden, but I'm the key to accessing it. Understanding dawned on Tarek's face. So this wasn't an execution at all. They never intended you to die out there? Lyra nodded. The plan was to retrieve me once the public display was complete. Break me, reprogram me if necessary, then return me to service with appropriate adjustments to my memory. But you were rescued by a random scavenger instead, Tarek said with a wry smile. Bad luck for them. If you're truly random, Lyra countered. The tension between them returned, charged with mutual suspicion. Tarek broke the silence first. I have no love for the hegemony, if that's what you're asking. But I'm not affiliated with any resistance movements either. My only allegiance is to myself. Then why help me? Why risk hegemony attention? Tarek turned back to the console, his expression unreadable. Maybe I'm tired of watching them destroy everything they touch. Something in his tone suggested personal experience. Lyra decided not to press further. Instead, she moved to stand beside him, studying the scanner displays. Those patrol patterns, they're expanding their search perimeter. They'll be within range by mid-morning, Tarek confirmed. We need to move before dawn. To where? The nearest settlement is crawling. With hegemony informants, Tarek manipulated the map, zooming out to show a wider area. There's another option, the fissure. He indicated a massive canyon system to the northwest. The mineral deposits interfere with scanning technology. It's where the scavengers and other outcasts have their hidden enclave.